So today, we're going to be talking about the hymns we sing. From time to time, new hymnals appear in our pews. When I first joined this church, we sang from the Pilgrim hymnal, whose copyright was 1931, with several updates. Many of you will remember its maroon cover on the right, and may even have one at home. Also pictured is the hymnal from the Congregational Church, which was the church which united with the Methodist Episcopal Church in 1928 to form the Federated Church. And just an aside, that Congregational Church was the first church in Morris, Minnesota. Back in the 1990s, our church adopted the United Methodist hymnal. While still in production, I remember the congregation being introduced to some new songs that it contained and learning the origin of those hymns. Reverend Jerry Hankins was with us at that time, and he was very interested in hymns and their impact on Christian living and learning. He took delight in introducing these songs to us. I remember the story behind "It Is Well With My Soul." Horatio G. Spofford was a successful lawyer and businessman in Chicago with a lovely family, a wife, Anna, and 5 children. However, they were not strangers to tears and tragedy. Their young son died of pneumonia in 1871, and in that same year, much of their business was lost in the Great Chicago Fire. Yet, God in his mercy and kindness allowed the business to flourish once more. On November 21st, 1873, the French ocean liner Ville de Havre was crossing the Atlantic from the United States to Europe with 313 passengers on board. Among the passengers was Mrs. Spofford and her 4 daughters. Although Mr. Spofford had planned to go with the family, he found it necessary to stay in Chicago to help solve some unexpected business problem. He told his wife he would join her and their children in Europe a few days later. His plan was to take another ship. After 4 days into the crossing of the Atlantic, the Ville de Havre collided with a powerful iron-hulled Scottish ship, the Loch Erin. Suddenly, all of those on board were in grave danger. The ship sank with 226 passengers, including the 4 Spofford children. Anna was spotted floating on a piece of wreckage. And after hearing this story, Horatio set sail to attend to his grieving wife. On the way over, the captain of the ship informed Horatio that they were on the location where his children went down. According to Bertha Spofford Vester, a daughter born after the tragedy, Spofford wrote, "It is well with my soul," while on this journey. And I don't see the... Well, anyway, if you were to look this song up, you will notice that the name of the tune for these words is Ville de Havre, which is the name of the ship that sunk. So you may ask yourself, why do we need new hymnals? What's wrong with the old ones? Why don't the new ones include all our favorites? You will notice from the copyright dates that we really don't change hymnals that often. It took over 50 years for the Pilgrim hymnal and its updates to be replaced by the New Century hymnal, which, by the way, you might want to take out and have in your lap. It's the, I can't tell you what color. I still call one of the hymnals blue, and it's as black can be. The Methodist hymnal was about 30 years in between, and just like everything else in life, changes occur. There are new composers and new songs that seem to talk to the times in a different manner than the older ones. Hymns, being a vital part of the Sunday service, need to be changed out to meet the needs and tastes of newer generations of Christians. As to why aren't your favorite ones any longer included, If all the songs were kept as well as the new songs included, the hymnals would be so large and heavy that it'd be difficult to use. Some of these later problems have been partially solved by introducing smaller hymnals like you see, The Faith We Sing, which came out in 2000. Newer hymns and some older ones had been left out of the United Methodist hymnal, and I imagine a few people complained about it, and so they were included in The Faith We Sing. Actually, there's another United Methodist hymnal. It's green. It's called Worship and Song, and its copyright was 2011, and which has been added since The Faith We Sing, but we have not purchased it. Our newest hymnal in this church is the New Century hymnal. It is the United Church of Christ hymnal that replaces the Pilgrim hymnal. And when researching information about the New Century hymnal, I found out that its authors wanted to adapt songs to fit the 21st century, hence the title of the hymnal. From Goodreads' website, I learned, quote, "This is a hymnal that invites us into a new century. The best hymns of the past are combined with exciting new hymnody from some of the finest contemporary poets and composers, reflecting the pluralistic church in which we worship today. The New Century hymnal has been created with a high level of musical and theological scholarship, including remarkable new translations of original texts. Its texts honor tradition while at the same time using inclusive language that will welcome and affirm as all members of Christ's church," unquote. And I remember back in the 70s and 80s where we were, and Jerry Hankins was very much behind this, using inclusive language in the church. It has a full 934 pages and 600 hymns. Many new translations were to bring freshness and clarity to older texts, and there's more than 100 psalms fully set to music. There's arrangements and harmonizations carefully selected for the congregational singing, like that first song that we sang, "When in Our Music We Are Glorified." That's also in the Methodist hymnal, but because it is incorporated into the music, it's really hard to find the melody line. And so I really like this new one because the melody line is set totally apart from the rest of the music, so you don't get confused as to what in the world are we supposed to be singing. It also includes orders of worship with services for morning and evening prayer, as does the Methodist. Let's compare some hymns to see what the aforementioned means. We will, of course, notice those word changes as we see in the following hymns. So these are the two hymns. If you want to, the first one is in the hymnal we just sang out of, number 6. And if you compare that to the very same song, Sing Praise to God, in the Methodist hymnal, 126. It's the very same tune, but you're going to notice really, really different words in it. And these are so tiny. I was hoping they would be, I don't know, I guess I was imagining that we had this great big huge screen like you do when you're at a conference, and you could read these easily. And I see from here I can barely tell that there's music on the page. So, okay, so these are, so did you look through and kind of compare the words? They are quite different if you're looking at those two hymnals. And some of us, I'm looking at Allison right now, some of us have noticed some of these hymns. We're used to singing certain words, and I couldn't come up with that word that we remembered or the song, but the Ebenezer part that's in another song, and none of us in the congregation even know what Ebenezer is. In fact, every time we look at it, we got to look the darn thing up to see what it even means. But by George, when the Ebenezer isn't in the song, then we go, what? Where's Ebenezer at? And that's the same way here. And these are some other songs like Guide Me, O
we always sing, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah," is how we usually sing it. And this is, "Guide me, O my great Redeemer. Come, thou fount of every blessing." You know that one. This is, "Come, O fount of every blessing." And even the doxology, "All people that on earth do dwell," has been updated to have different words. Now, what I have noticed about these is they are basically changing the words to songs that were written in the 1800s. And obviously, we're looking at, a century and a half later. The words that we use in our general speaking are not the words that were then. I remember I belonged to an organization, and we would always use the word admonish. Well, I don't use the word admonish in my reading or in my regular day life anymore. And so as words change, they have updated these songs. So don't be too upset if we grab a song and you go, start singing and you notice that it's different words, because as stated earlier, sometimes new words bring new meaning to a song for us as well. Of course, change creates some criticism too. When I recently spoke with Reverend Rick Wagner, the head of the UCC Church in Minnesota, he warned me to use traditional Christmas carols. Don't sing the ones from this hymnal. He says, you will have people so upset with great consternation because they changed a lot of the words. So, with that advisement, we will not be singing Christmas carols out of this book. We'll go to the Red Book, where we know the words and probably even have memorized some of them. The advertisement for the UCC hymnal similarly claims could be made for a dozen or more hymnals released in 1995, promises, quote, to revise language that unintentionally reflects unjust biases and prejudices of our past. And we know many different songs that we just don't sing anymore. Richard J. Stanislaw's criticism of the new hymnal is that every thee and thou is stripped from its historic use. But when we do lectionaries, we don't use these and thous anymore either. Lord, which appears over 1,300 times in the Bible, is rarely used. And the goals of diversity are sacrificed for a 20th century understanding of correct expression. And so here is this song, "It Is Well," which is in the Red Hymnal 377. And in the New Century Hymnal 438, and I'll just read some of those examples. In the Red Hymnal says, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when peace like a river upholds me each day." And in the other hymnal it says, when peace like a river attendeth my way. In the New Century Hymnal it says, when peace like a river upholds me each day. And in the Red Book, though Satan should buffet, in the new one it says, though evil should tempt me. And the word buffet, if you read it incorrectly, it looks like buffet anyway, so you have to be careful. So Stanislaw did find things he thinks are unique and more worthy in the New Century Hymnal, and these are the things that I'll point out. One thing that he points out is one helpful and unusual feature are the careful, accurate, and brief historical notes that appear on the page with each hymn. So I picked out one, and this is "In Christ There Is No East or West." Now you'll notice some really small printing at the bottom, and if you just open the hymnal to any page, you will see it explains where that hymn came from and the history behind it. And being a history nut, like someone else I know, I find that very fascinating. So here in Christ There Is No, this is This is the one for the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and who in the world would have ever known this? I knew it was the words were by Julia Ward Howe, because that's my musicology coming up. But did you know that she was an early leader in the movement for women's suffrage, which is voting, and she was an abolitionist, and those were people against slavery. And she wrote this text specifically for a familiar camp meeting tune one night after reviewing Union troops near Washington, D.C. It was published on the front page of the Atlantic Monthly, and they are the ones that added the title, Battle Hymn of the Republic. Now, I would have never known that. And that sure would fit into some of the, I can't remember if it's 7th grade or if it's 10th grade or where it is, where these kids are learning this type of thing. Now, one of my favorite songs that happens to be in both hymnals, but I really remember it out of the Pilgrim hymnal, is Many and Great. Now, many hymns that are translations are provided with a stanza of their original language. Many and Great in Lakota is an example of that. And it says below the music, probably the best known Native American hymn, Many and Great, is sung with great reverence by and here they say the Dakota people, and I'll explain why it says Dakota rather than Lakota, by the Dakota people in worship, at communion, and for births, funerals, and burials. Renville, which you will recognize as a county, Renville was one of the first whites that came here, and he intentionally learned the Dakota language, and he helped establish the Lac-Qui-Parle mission in Minnesota. Now, the Native Americans from that area were Dakota. Our family that's here are farther, they live farther out west, and those are Lakota. The ones that lived in the middle are called Nakota. So there's actually 3 different big groups. And Fraser, Fraser, who paraphrased it for us, in other words, translated it, was a congregational Native American minister. And I would have never known that if they hadn't written that down. There are other songs too. This one is Teodoro, and it is Latin, and they're the words of Thomas Aquinas. And my husband is one of those people who took a lot of philosophy and religion classes, and so he, for one, is very aware of Thomas Aquinas. He was a friar and a philosopher in the early 1300s. And on the other side, 428 is a Filipino song, which is used to serenade individuals at early dawn on their birthdays. And I can't help but think of Filipino people when this church was evolved, when Jerry Hankins was here, with the Filipino family and minister family that also came here. I also noticed that the NCH, the New Century Hymnal, has many more spirituals written the way I learned them at camp or school. I remember Reverend Hilda Parks, who was here, who was also interested in music as I, pointed out to me many years ago that those spiritual tunes included in the United Methodist hymnal are every single one of them are adapted by a William Farley Smith, who tried to change them so that they could be more easily sung. And they often don't flow as easily as they might. These are much more traditional, the spirituals that are in there. And if you've ever seen music or experienced music in black churches or spirituals sung by black people, they're much more free than what we do. They're not dum 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 as we sing songs. What I find fascinating as a singer is the variety of music from which we can now choose.
Here, for instance, is a new song. It's called "They Ask Who's My Neighbor," and we often have things that talking about about your neighbor and how we should react to them. And some of you will remember a hymn we used to sing. Oop, I went too far. And it's this one, "Take My Gifts." We used to sing that quite a bit when Pastor Jennifer was here. And now we actually have it in the New Century Hymnal, and it won't need to be copied off. Which, by the way, the church pays a yearly fee to make copies of such songs from other hymnals and from other locales for the congregational use only, in case you wondered about the copyrights. I hope this introduction to our new hymnal, the New Century Hymnal, has helped you learn a bit more about it and why we now have a great variety of music from which we choose to sing. As with other hymnals in our pews, it will take us some time to get better acquainted with it, and I hope that you do take the time to do so. It's very interesting. So as we sing out of this hymnal, just glance down, or when the song gets done, glance down and read some of the history of the song. It's very fascinating.